I'm Tamae. I am an artist. I am also a songwriter and producer and a curator of music.
Welcome to The Vietnamese. I'm your host, Kenneth Nguyen. Being part of a culture of nearly 100 million Vietnamese people in the world today comes with a lot of pain, proud history, and privilege. Join me as I highlight and explore the Vietnamese experience from all over the world. Thanks for coming on. So what does it mean to be Vietnamese to you?
We're so diverse as Vietnamese, and that's what I love about being Vietnamese. We have a lot of like flavors and diversity within our music and within our foods, within our culture, within the peoples of Vietnam. And so that's what it means to be Vietnamese to me, is to be proud and to be true to yourself and inclusive. I feel that's what Vietnamese is to me.
How did your mom and dad come to the United States?
My grandfather came over here in 1985. So he had left Vietnam to Malaysia. He had worked in the government, and because of the war and everything, he wanted to like set a new life for his family. So he came over from Vietnam to Malaysia, stayed there for a little while, and then went to the Philippines for like another year or two to learn, English and the how to survive in the US essentially. And then he had come over here about 1987 and went to Washington, D.C., worked for about 5 years, and then sponsored my dad and his two other younger children at that time and his wife to come over to America. And then once that had happened, that was around 1992 was when my dad came over to America. And with that, he had just married my mom back in Vietnam. And so he worked to, save up enough money for me and my mother to come over. And we came over about 2 years after that.
So you were actually born in Vietnam?
Yeah. I was born in Vietnam. Yeah,
Oh, cool.
I was born in 1997 in Vietnam.
Got it. So uh, where did your father and your mother relocate to when they first got here?
They first came over and stayed in Washington, D.C. And then my dad had to leave with my mother. Um, and they went to Michigan, straight to like Rochester, Michigan, and started growing their business, their nail business over there. And that's when I believe I came over about a year or two after, because he brought my mother over first. And I had to stay back in Vietnam with my grandmother. And then after that, they were able to bring me over here to Washington, D.C. I stayed over there with my other grandmother on my dad's side. And then after that, once they had enough money, they were able to, bring my grandparents and me from Washington, D.C. over to Michigan.
So got it. So what
Yeah.
was it like growing up in Michigan?
It was definitely an experience. I think growing up as an immigrant, I grew up in a very affluent area. Rochester is like a wealthy upper middle class area. And my family was definitely just, regular middle class. But growing up there was interesting because I felt I always had to learn how to be Americanized and how to, function around um, the white folks that lived, in my area and learn how they moved. At the same time, at home, I had to, speak Vietnamese with my grandparents and work at the nail salon and, raise my siblings. And so it was like growing up there, I constantly had this like double sided life that I always lived, the life that I lived at school with my friends and everything. And then the life that I live at home, which was a completely different person and a completely different life for me. So
Yeah,
it was very interesting.
it's crazy listening to this because I know, your hip hop background. It's nothing like what you're describing right now, right?
Yeah, no, not at all. I didn't really listen to hip hop growing up, which is kind of the crazy thing because I work in that realm. I work in the realm of hip hop and R&B. I grew up listening to Whitney Houston and Michael Jackson because of my parents, and I listened to a lot of J Lo and Backstreet Boys and 98 Degrees and stuff. But when it comes to like true hip hop and R&B, I didn't know the world of that because of the environment that I grew up in. And the environment that I grew up in was very, white. And so, with that being said, I grew up listening to a lot of pop, alternative, bit of rock and folk music. So it's incredibly different from what I do now.
Yeah. Very,
Yeah.
a lot more diverse, it sounds like, than what you are making now, right?
Yes. Yes, 100%.
Now, did the white folk that you grow up with, this is going to be a crazy question, but was it like
Yeah.
gentle white folk like you grew up with, or was it a little bit more like 8 Mile and it's like, a little bit rougher? I know at Rochester what you're saying is affluent, but I don't know what school you went to and what was that experience with the white folks that you grew up with?
Hmm. I went to a school within Rochester. It was a newly renovated school. My parents chose a very, nice place to live. And we were right by the nail salon. So it was like 5 minutes from the nail salon, 5 minutes from the school. So it was convenient for them. But this school was like a brand new school within the district. So it was the richest school within the district. And it was, for the most part, people were fairly nice. Of course, I grew up with some comments here and there and just a lot of ignorance, of course. And I, for the most part, I kind of like suppressed who I was as like a Vietnamese individual. Like I remember when I was in elementary school, my mom used to pack like all these lunches for me. And kids used to be really confused about all the smells and all the different things that they were seeing within my lunch. And so, after a while, I told my mom I don't want any more
Yeah.
like, lunches packed. I just want to buy some school lunches. And I tried to really fit in because I felt very different from everyone. And I did struggle with English a bit, when I first came there. I actually got held back a grade because in kindergarten, I didn't know enough English, even though I was the right age to join. It was really difficult for me because I would think in Vietnamese, but it would come out weird. You know what I mean? Like speaking
Hmm.
a brand new language, it was hard for me. So they actually held me back. There wasn't a lot of, at that time, and I understood at that time, there wasn't a lot of help for people, for immigrants, and
Yeah.
for, people of different backgrounds. And so uh, they weren't able to do that. Now I think it's a bit different, but back then it was definitely difficult. Um,
How's your Vietnamese now?
my Vietnamese is good. I can speak like elementary level Vietnamese. Like I can have a good conversation with you, but if you want to get deep into like,
Yeah.
some thought provoking stuff, I don't really understand too much. And
Right.
the slang in Vietnam, like in Vietnam, is hard for me to understand. But when I have a lot of cousins back in Vietnam, and I'm able to still, speak to them and joke around with them for the most part.
Yeah. So as you're growing up in Rochester, right, and
Yeah.
you're not really exposed to the music that you're currently making, uh, did you think musically at all? Were you inclined? You're moving towards music, or what did you think about when you were growing up in terms of what you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah. So my dad, I went to church, and like at church, we definitely sang a lot. And that's kind of like what really got me into music was I really looked up to my pastor, and he had these two daughters who were, very musically inclined. They played the piano for church, and, we would always just sing every single time at church. And that's where I felt like most comfortable was like at
Mm.
church when I, at a young age, because I was like people who just understood me. And so, yeah, that's what got me started. It was my pastor's daughter that got me started with music. I just love singing. I love like playing the piano. And so when I was 6, my dad put me into piano lessons, and it was classical piano. And that's kind of like where I started within my like music journey. And then throughout that, I think for a while I was just playing classical piano. I didn't really enjoy it too much, but as an Asian family, they just kind of forced you to continue
Yeah.
to do it. And I loved singing. My dad loved singing in the family. My mom loves singing. Karaoke is huge, and
What kind
I
of
think it was
what kind of songs did you all sing together?
I actually used to sing a lot of Vietnamese songs like growing up. Like because like they had like, the Vietnamese karaoke going on all the time. And so that, I kind of fell into that. And I cannot tell you the songs that I used to
I know I
sing.
was about to put you on the spot, but I'm like, I don't want to do
um,
that. Mm.
I think there was one like, man, I might be butchering this, but it was like Bang Jang Kaup or something along those lines.
Mhm.
But Gak Ding was like, like my favorite person growing up. Andy Kwok was, he was like, I was like, these were my people back then, watching Paris by Night,
Mhm.
watching Bang Sung growing up. That was like what
That was
got
your
me to
jam at
like
the
really,
time, yeah.
yeah, that what got me to really love music. And then once I got into middle school, I started really like exploring the American side of music. I mean, I explored it in elementary school, but that's when I dove in really deep with it. And my dad had learned how to play the guitar. He like self-taught himself. And so I got inspired by that and self-taught myself in middle school. And that's really where I got an interest in like making music essentially, or composing music myself. And so I learned how to play the guitar, and I also learned how to play the ukulele.
Hmm.
And during that time in middle school, we had a choir class, and going into that was like, I think I like found my little like area, like
Yeah.
a group of people that just understood me and that I really enjoyed. But I was really shy back then, and so I didn't really speak up much, and I didn't really understand, like making my own music at that time. So I did a lot of covers and stuff. And I used to bring, funny story, I used to bring my ukulele to school all the time. And it got to a point where like the kids would call me the ukulele girl in like middle school, because I would just bring it around and play. And I just enjoyed like playing for people and
Yeah.
like playing the piano, and everyone would like sing along. And that was like my favorite part back then. And so I felt like I could fit in, because that was the only way I could fit in, is through music, really. And so, yeah, that was really fun. And then throughout high school, I started getting into like the YouTubers online. There was a lot of like Vietnamese and like just Asian YouTubers in general that were really going off at that time. And like the YouTuber cover type of like trend was going super hard at that time. And I don't think that was like a thing beforehand. And it
Right.
was just like really bubbling when I was in high school. And so I think around then I started getting interested in like music production. I understood it, but I didn't really know too much. I didn't jump into it too much, but I remember it like really piqued my interest, and it was something that I thought about doing. I don't think I ever really dove in deep, because it wasn't something my parents were really like all for.
Yeah.
They would let me do it, but like
But what kind of
music.
music were you covering with the ukulele though?
Oh, like a lot of like Plain White Tea, Sarah Bareilles, just like a lot of pop music and some folk music here and there. And yeah, it's that's the majority of it was
Yeah.
just like pop and folk.
What about at church? What was it, Vietnamese choir or was it like a white American church?
It was a Vietnamese church.
And it
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah. It was a Oh, I'm sorry,
like
go ahead.
Protestant or some Baptist church or
I believe it was a Methodist church,
Methodist
if
church.
I'm correct.
All that
Yes.
matters because there's different musical traditions that come with the different churches, right?
Right. Right. I'm so happy that I grew up in a Methodist church, because we just sang like a lot of Christian songs, like the popular Christian songs, and like we sang a lot of popular Vietnamese Christian songs, just like more modernized Vietnamese Christian songs and stuff. And so that's what I grew up in. It's just like singing all of that. It was like a more fun environment than I would say Catholic
Yeah.
churches would be.
And a lot of the Paris by Night singers in the early days came from the Catholic church choirs or, Christian church choirs. A lot of them. Yeah.
Oh, I did
Yeah.
not know that.
A lot of them come from that. Yeah. Because I grew up, in the 70s and the 80s. And so, my mom would point them out like, oh, that lady came from the church. That lady came from the church. She would point them out. I mean, but, you think about Elton John and you think about all these big superstars, their sounds, come from church choir, black church gospel choir, and the tradition of religious music seeps into our, musical culture throughout the world.
Wow. That's I never thought about that before, or the correlation between that. Just talking to you about this right now, like the conversation, I'm starting to few things are clicking in my mind. That's
Yeah.
crazy. It
I mean,
rolls
because
deep.
if you listen to like Elton John or even like a band like Erasure, right? And these are like
Yeah, yeah.
bands that are like, you could hear the gospel church influence in the chorus. You could hear like when Elton John has backup singers, or I would even go as far as to say Maroon 5, and you go to all of these pop music, you could hear the influence of black church music, and it's prevalent
Oh,
in a lot
100%.
of stuff that you listen to. And then what has trickled down to Vietnamese Christian music, coming from the black tradition, I don't know. That there's got to be some sort of linkage there too,
Mhm.
because it can't be straight, and especially in the United States with Methodist churches, because it's American tradition, and here in
Yeah.
America, but it's all goes back to this, like, all right, if you think about this, right, like rock and roll back in the day was really from the black community. It was from the
Oh,
black community.
100%. It
And
was
then
a
Elvis
lot.
and
Yeah.
yeah, Elvis and Buddy Holly, all these guys like co-opted it, and it became like this white thing, and U2, and then Aerosmith, and it became like Rolling Stones. But all of those guys learned from black rock and roll musicians, and then that all of that came from churches and stuff like that. And then it went, if you think about it, the Beatles and everything went back to Vietnam in the 60s and 70s through like pop music, right? That
Mhm.
music, the way that style went back to the United States, along with the Vietnamese Christian, all of it influencing, but it all comes from like this, because in the 50s, it just like transformed into, and I'm butchering the history of this all, but it all goes back to black music.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
So through my journey of like going into hip hop and R&B, uh, I really wanted to, and I give a lot of credit to my producer, my main producer, and he's like my partner in crime throughout my entire journey. But he really made it prevalent for me to like really learn the history of why things are the way that they are, and where music comes from, not just like appreciating the music, but appreciating the history of the music. And so I have made it a mission since I started, my career, that I really wanted to dive deep into the history and to be able to respect what I'm doing, because
Mhm.
I know that I'm not black, and I'm a proud Vietnamese, and I know I love and appreciate hip hop and R&B so much, but I wanted to do it right. You know what I mean? And I wanted to do it with respect and understanding, just as, I would like if anyone wanted to do Vietnamese music or Gai Lung, and they're not of the race, I would want them to, understand the history and like really get a good grasp of it.
Mhm.
But when I started learning that uh, even country music that came from blues, and blues came from black people, and the truth about, because I grew up thinking I grew up in a white area, so I thought Elvis was like the inventor of rock and roll, and I thought I knew Michael Jackson was the king of pop, but when you look at pop you only see white faces. And so that's what I thought music was. And then all I knew was that black people was R&B and hip hop, right? And in the area that I grew up in with my parents and everything, there was, oh, we don't like to talk about it, but there was definitely like a barrier when it came to black music. And I think that's why I didn't really listen to it, because
Mhm.
my parents didn't want me to, and the people around me definitely didn't. And so that wasn't ever something I ever really looked to dive into.
Can we segue and talk about your partner, and can we get into the relationship of all of that, because we talked about that in an earlier conversation, but what's his name?
His name is Lyric Layson.
Lyrically, son, what a beautiful name.
Yeah. And it's crazy
Beautiful
because that's
name.
his like his government name. And I'm like, it's crazy that you are in music and your name literally means lyric, the song, because les sons is French for the song.
Wow. It's beautiful. Beautiful name.
Yeah.
So, how did you meet Lyric?
I met Lyric at a Vietnamese 4th of July party, which is
So random.
crazy to think because he is a Black man. And I remember I was bartending this party, and Vietnamese people, we have like the craziest parties, and we bring everybody within the community, and it goes wild, right? And so like it's all Vietnamese people, it's my parents, everyone from the community. And I remember like bartending, and I look over and I see, this one person who doesn't fit in with everybody else.
Mm.
And so I was like, oh man, this is different. And he actually approached me while I was like bartending, and he had this very like genuine energy to him.
Hmm.
And I was never really much of a partier, and that's why I decided to bartend, because I had just learned how to bartend at that time. And a lot of the kids my age were like trying to party with their parents and stuff, and
Yeah.
I was just trying to like practice bartending. And so he came over, he was like, hey, like, what's your name, and like, how are you doing? I think he noticed that I was kind of like an odd one out, and so he came
Yeah.
out and just like asked me how I was doing, and then we exchanged Instagrams, and that was it. Like, it wasn't like anything
Who
big.
who brought him to the
Then
party?
it was
All
actually one of
Vietnamese
like,
party, right?
yeah. So like he hung out with like some of the kids my age that they were like the popular kids at that time. And so he hung out with them, and they loved to party, and they knew him through a friend of theirs, and he is their cousin. So it's like, their friend group essentially. And he is a DJ. And so they had asked him to like come to the party. And funny thing is, he really didn't want to, and he last minute decided to. So that one decision kind of like blossomed into
Hmm.
all of this. But yeah, it was just like a friend of his who invited him to a Vietnamese party, and to DJ. And so that's what he did. He came, brought his equipment and everything. And
And so now I have to ask the question, like
yeah.
family dynamics, mom and dad, how did they accept him in the beginning? What was it like dating a black person for you?
Oh, so yeah, actually we didn't start dating at first. He had hit me up on Instagram like a few months later. And this is like the type of person that he is. He kind of like follows his gut instinct, but he told me that something randomly told him to just, message me out of nothing, not trying to like slide into the DMs or anything,
Hmm.
just trying to see like who I was. And so he messaged me, and we struck up a conversation. And at that time I had just moved out of my parents' home, and I was living on my own in Detroit because I was going to school for marketing at like Wayne State. And I didn't really like what I was doing at that time, so I was finding outlets, and like one of my outlets was like just writing music, and I was just writing for fun, so I wasn't thinking anything of it. uh, the idea popped in my head about making music, and because there was a producer who had just uh you know talked to me about it like a week or so before that, and that's when I started thinking about that. But I told him, yeah, I had written a song. I sent him the song. He was like, oh, I'm a producer and I do all this. And I was like, I don't know what you do really. Like, I had no idea like this other side of like the production of music at all. And so, he was nice enough to just be like, oh yeah, like here, listen to some of my music. He had some remixes up on SoundCloud. And he was like, if you want, you can like come over and like we could, see what we could make together. Cause I think at that time he was looking for an artist himself, and he had this like grand plan of, making it in the industry. And one of it was finding an artist. And so it just came at the right time. And so I did, I came to his place and we started working on music, and then our relationship grew just as like friendship. And then he had some roommate problems, and essentially I had offered for him to like move into my apartment at the time. And it wasn't like on anything, like weird. I was like, if you need a place to stay like temporarily, you can stay in my living room. I had a dog, and I had a one bedroom, so I could just stay in my bedroom. You could have the living room to yourself, set up your equipment and stuff. And it made it easier for me because he lived far from me at the time. So I had to like drive to him every single time to
So
make
there was like
music.
no nothing, no romance, no nothing,
Absolutely. But that's
nothing
the craziest thing.
from him or from you.
Nothing. Like it was all platonic.
Find
And
that
like
hard to believe, but
I know,
right?
I know it's pretty hard to believe. Okay, this is funny thing is before him, I'm bisexual. So before him, I was mainly dating women. I had never like had a boyfriend before. So I wasn't even like, I wasn't even thinking about it in that way. I had just gotten out of a relationship and like I was just trying to just focus on myself and just make music. And for
Yeah.
him, he was just strictly just trying to like make some music. That's it. And so we came and lived together, and our friendship just like really grew. Like we became like best friends, and we're just like we just hit it off that way. And I think after a while, like about 6 months in or so, that's when, I think when you make music with somebody so intimately, I
Yeah.
think it's hard to not grow that type of a relationship. And he's my best friend, and so it
Yeah.
got to a point where he was just like, "I like you," and I was like, "Okay, well, I don't want my best friend to leave. So let's
Oh,
try this out," type of thing.
yeah.
And my parents, they were cool with him at first, definitely. Like they
Like
were
as a friend,
as a friend,
as a
they were,
producer.
yeah, as a producer, they're
But
like, "Oh, cool," like
but did they
you
know
know.
that you dated girls though too, your mom and dad?
Yeah, they knew. They knew.
So this was like not new territory for them like to expand their thinking, right?
Yeah, no, no, it's not new territory for them. Uh, they knew I dated girls, and I had a girlfriend for about 2 years, in high school, and they knew, but I don't think we were ever really like addressed what it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't think they thought anything of him. Like they knew of him because he DJ'd some of the parties prior, and I didn't know this, but like
Huh.
he had come to like some of the parties before because that friend had invited him. And everyone in the community already knew who he was. It was like, "Hey, it's Lyric the DJ." And so when I brought him over, I'd bring him over for like dinner sometimes, and I'm like, "Yeah, this is my friend," you know what I mean? And they were super nice to him, like shared food, like everything. But once they found out I dated him, that was a bit of a different situation.
Okay, so then they sit you
Yeah.
down. I mean, how does it all transpire? You know, because my mind
It,
works like that, right? I'm like, I have to like visualize like the conversation your mom and dad has and how crazy or awkward it got. Or was it just a smooth sailing kind of thing? It's like a little bit of bump and then you guys move on and
Not so much in my situation, unfortunately. Uh, it was, and a part of it is because they knew that we lived together. And within the Vietnamese community, there's like a certain way to introduce somebody when you're dating them, and we did it in a very unorthodox way. And I think they were just like very thrown off by that, so they
wait,
didn't
so
really.
what was the way you are you not gonna tell well how did you introduce unorthodox? What was the
Yeah,
unorthodox?
well, like they knew that he was like a friend, and I was like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
he's living with me, like make some music together." And that's what they knew, and like they were okay with that. And then I was like, "Oh, I'm dating him," and that's when like things kind of got a little messy. My dad completely switched up, like Asian father mode like kicked in, and he was like, "No, this is not cool." Like he didn't want to talk to him, he didn't want to talk to me. Like it was a situation that kind of got a little rocky, you know what I mean? And for a while I kind of had to, my relationship with my father and my mom kind of like fell out, because, and this is like not in a, okay, let me kind of backtrack a little bit. He was my friend. We started making music a lot together, and around that time I had met Illmind. So let me like backtrack a little bit into how like I introduced him to my family. And my parents knew we were like friends and we were making music together. When I met Illmind, Lyric had like a ticket to one of his Past the Aux events. which is an event where producers come and they share their music and they get to ask Illmind like, questions about the industry and whatever. He gets to critique their beat, and then you get to meet people within your community and network with people within your
Okay, I
area.
have to stop you. Why is Illmind important?
Yeah, yeah.
Who is he?
Oh, so yeah, Illmind is currently our mentor, and he signed us under his label. So we are signed under Illmind's label, Roseville Music Group and Empire. So he is the reason that we, how do I say this? He's the reason that we are where we are. He's a huge mentor of ours. We've followed him and tried to work with him within the past like 4 years, and our relationship built within the past 4 years. And now I'm at a position that he granted us through our hard work and our
Mm-hmm.
journey. He granted us, an opportunity to be signed under his label that he had just opened up, and signed us under a joint venture with Empire.
So Illmind is a producer that he's made beats for
Yes, yes.
people and like big
Yeah,
names.
yeah, yeah. Yes, Illmind is a huge producer. So he has produced for Beyonce, Drake, Nicki. He produced Love Yours for J. Cole. That was like one of the biggest things like to me and when I had
Mm-hmm.
first met him. And yeah, he's an incredible person. He's also known within the industry as a person who helps out other producers. So he started a podcast like long ago, I believe in like 2008, if I'm correct. If I'm, don't quote me on that.
Mm-hmm.
But he had started a podcast, talking about things within the industry, which was very kind of like taboo at that time.
Yeah.
And he is known as like the person to help other producers and like to teach other producers about the industry. He was the first person to start sample kits, which is now a huge thing within the industry. He was the first one to release a drum kit, which was very taboo at the time as well, because producers back then weren't very, um, they didn't want to share their sauce, essentially, like
Yeah.
producers were very protective over their music and their methods. But he was the first person to say, oh, you know what, just fuck it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, excuse my language.
No,
He said, all
say
right,
whatever
cool,
you
cool, cool,
want.
cool.
Yeah.
He said, just fuck it. I'm going to release like a drum kit for people. And this has now set kind of like the foundation and the example for a lot of producers. Like a lot of producers that you see today that sell sample kits, that do samples, that, have a model. Because producers didn't really have like a whole branding or a whole like, what's the word? A whole production within their own business. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? For the
Mm-hmm.
most part, producers are just known as producers and they make music. But he was the first person to kind of revolutionize like what you
Got it.
can do
That
with
model.
that position, that model. And so
Mm-hmm.
like everyone's followed that model now, from like Kenny Beats to like uh to Boy Wonder to Kato to every producer you could think of. A lot of them model after Illmind and what he had
Mm.
done for
It was like a
the community.
pioneer.
Yeah, he's definitely a pioneer. That's a
Okay,
great
so
word for
let's go back to the story of
it.
your
Mm-hmm.
parents and you guys going off to an event, you and Lyric going off to an event for Illmind.
Yes. Yeah. So we went off to that event. At that time, we didn't have any music recorded. And I wasn't really supposed to go to the event. It was supposed to be somebody else. But last minute, fate, I credit everything to like the universe and
Yeah.
fate. But, fate happened. He called me last minute and we created a song a night before. And I remember going to the event. I sang the song live to Illmind, which is very different from everyone else because they kind of like plugged and played. And I just like plugged in an instrumental and sang it live. And I think, Illmind, we were the only people within that group that Illmind was like, hey, like, send me some of your music after you guys are done with it. And I was like, taken aback. That was the first time that like someone actually
Reacted strongly.
reacted strongly, and not just like anybody, because we just had friends at the time who reacted strongly about our stuff and supporters. But this is like someone within the industry that like said something like that. And so I I go with my gut instinct a lot. And at that time, like I said, I didn't like going to school for marketing or anything. And so I was looking for an out. And that was like my confirmation to continue on with that career. And so after hearing that from someone as influential as Illmind, I was like, man, like I don't want to like, I want to do this forever. Like, I don't want, this feels so good. I don't want to continue wasting my time on anything else. And so Lyric and I had made a decision, and this is his idea. He had this like crazy idea. He was like, yo, like what if we go to every single one of the Pasiaks? Like, what if we just like show up to them? Because like we had such a wonderful experience meeting everyone within the community. And that was my favorite part, was like meeting people and making connections
Community.
and friendships. Yeah. Because that was the first time we had something like that. And so me and him chased that feeling. Like, we made a decision. I think it was like a couple nights afterwards. Like, we had a conversation. We made the decision. We were like, okay, like let's do this. Let's like go to every single one of them. And when we made that decision, shortly after, I had made the decision to drop out of school. And this is why the rocky situation started happening. So I dropped out of school. I didn't tell my parents at first. I just dropped out. And I just like stopped going to school. I already wasn't really going to school anyways. Like, I would only show up for tests, but like, so I was already tapped out mentally.
Yeah, you weren't
But
feeling it.
yeah, I wasn't feeling it. So I completely tapped out. And I didn't wait. I waited until like August to tell my parents, because we had traveled like to Chicago and then Ohio, and things went so well there. Like, Illmind, we met more people. Illmind really loved our music. We progressed more as artists within those like 2 months, or few months, because I believe we went to see him in May. And so like there was like a few months where we went to like the one in Chicago, the one in Ohio, we went to the one in New York. And it's just like this feeling that we were chasing. I had quit school and we were just continuing to do this. And I was kind of doing it behind my parents' back. And it wasn't until, August rolled around, that was when our apartment lease was over. And we had to make a decision to either continue doing this or get a new apartment. And, we were tight on our money at the time. I was working at a restaurant. He was working at a restaurant as servers. He was DJing, gigs at bars and stuff. And at that time, he taught me how to DJ as well, because he was like, look, I learned how to DJ so that I wouldn't have to, work a restaurant job or another job ever again and just focus on music. And so he's like, I want you to learn how to do that as well. Wow. And he's like, this is who he is. He's just like an incredible human being. He's one of those people who's like, I'm not going to give you a fish. I'm going to teach you how to fish. Right. And so he taught me how to DJ. And at that time, I was DJing gigs and stuff. And so I remember taking my parents out to dinner and, showing them like some of the stuff that I was doing, some of the music. I had a laptop. I was so nervous, you know what I mean? And I just remember telling my parents, hey, like, I think I'm going to take a semester off of school. That's what I told them. I knew I was never going back, but I told them, hey, I'm going to take a semester off of school to focus on this. And the conversation went pretty well. Like, my dad was actually surprisingly like
Open to
supportive.
it.
Yeah, he was open to it. And he gave me, this is the best advice I'd ever gotten from him. But I remember that night very specifically because I cried when he was like supportive of it, because I did not expect it. You know what I mean? It was like a scary conversation. I sat in front of my siblings, and I'm like the oldest in the family. So I'm like a big example to them. And one of my biggest things is I just always want to be able to show them the right path as like an older sister. And so he told me, hey, while you move through this journey, I support you in this, and I'm going to see what you can do with it. So while you move through this journey, I want you to work really hard. And that's who my dad is. My dad's like a hustler. And he was like, I want you to work really hard at what you do. Remember that there's always going to be someone better than you and someone worse than you. And you ever seen like a racehorse? You know how like racing horses have their blinders on?
Yeah.
My dad said, remember to always keep your blinders on.
Wow.
Because the reason is like, and this is once again the best advice. He doesn't speak much. My dad's like a very, he's a very funny person, but he never gets like this serious. So he's like, keep your blinders on because the minute you start looking left or right, you fall. Always stay in your lane, stay straight, looking forward, and move fast. Don't be lazy. Don't, dilly dally. Don't get distracted because the minute you do, you fall. And that's what, racehorses do. That's why they have the blinders on so that they don't look left and right and see the other horses running. And I've carried that advice with me like throughout my entire journey. But long story short, we decided to give up our apartment and we moved in with Lyric's cousins at their house. I'm very fortunate. Their name's, Carl Michelle. If you're listening, thank you so much because you guys like are a huge part of it. But they let us move in for about a month. And I think when my parents really started to see me struggle, because I've been home through our journey, Lyric and I had to be homeless in a sense for 3 years. This apartment that you see right here, this is actually our first apartment since we started this, which was in 2018, you know? And throughout it all, we were just couch surfing and like sleeping in our cars. And this is something, you know, for Asian parents, this is not something they ever want their daughter to be put in a situation, and it's hard for them to see that. And so essentially, as any other parent would do, they see this man that you are now dating taking you out of school, taking you out of, your path that they wanted you to be on, a comfortable path, and making you uncomfortable and making you, struggle immediately. My dad, in his mind, that's not cool with him because as any man who has a daughter, you want your daughter to like date someone who provides for you, right? And of course they didn't understand what I was going through and they didn't understand him and what we were trying to do. And this is, fairly new to them. There's not very many people within our community that does this.
So it wasn't really a black thing with them.
It was and it wasn't. I think there's like definitely some underlying things for sure.
Or it didn't help, I guess.
It didn't help at all. No, it definitely did not help because growing up, my parents, it's
All Vietnamese or most.
yeah, all Vietnamese people. It's like, yeah, we're cool with black people. Like
Yeah,
you can
but
come and DJ for us and we'll hang out with you, but you date my daughter or my son, that's a different story.
but did they ever say it? Did they ever were they vocal about it?
No, I mean, they didn't straight out say, oh, it's because he's black.
Yeah.
They would say, oh, like, you know, those type of people, or they would say like poor, like ghetto, or like, whatever it is, they tend to like do, they'll date you and then they'll just leave you out on the streets type of thing. And like, don't get caught up in all of that. They do drugs and all this other stuff, like there would be mentions of it. Right. And so I gathered that and took it as, a different situation. I knew what they meant by that, but me being homeless and struggling definitely did not help that ideal or that perspective that they had on black people in general.
But how did it get to that point where it, like, you're living out of your car? Because is it because you're just so into making the music that you just don't worry about keeping a regular job to pay the rent? Or how does it get to that point?
So, like I said, our plan was to just take a month off and then, find an apartment within that month. I had to give up my dog that I had at the time because we couldn't afford to like take care of my dog anymore. We were traveling so much. It didn't make any sense. And Illmind had these Pass the Aux events every single month. And it would be multiple cities a month. And so that's expensive. Not only did we pay for the flights, we paid for our stay, we paid for the ticket, which was like $250 per ticket. And so like, that's a lot of money to like take out of your pocket. And we made this pact, like me and him, that we were going to go to every single one. And that's what we strive for. And so it was just like, do you want to be comfortable? Or do you want to continue to chase this dream? And one thing for sure that Lyric has taught me through, his study of the industry is that like you have to sacrifice, you have to grind, you have to like nobody who has ever been great has like had a comfortable life. They always had to give up something. And if I have to give up my comfortability and I have to give up, like a nice, comfortable bed and privacy and all of that, then I'll do that. You know what I mean? And it was just like the feeling of being able to make music and like what we were doing. I loved it so much. Like I didn't want to give that up. And like, especially after the conversation I had with my parents, they were testing me. They were like waiting for me to fail essentially, because this is not normal within within the Vietnamese community.
Right.
And their friends, the entire community, like I know for a fact, were waiting for me to fail, because this is not normal. Everybody else that I know within my community is either like going into nursing, being a doctor, going into engineering. So, within the community, we talk. And I for sure could not like go back and like try to go back to school or like any of that situation, because it was like I have to go all in or none at all.
But at what point did you really know that you were going to be okay if you pursue this path? Or did you not ever know? You were never really sure.
It was a battle for sure, because when it got hard, it was like I definitely questioned, like, is this like the right path for me? And is this going to work out for us? But the more we stuck with it, the law of attraction, the more we like stuck with it and the harder we grinded. They always say when something good is about to happen, the devil always tries to like, stop it or put tests in front of you to stop it from happening. And so every single time things got really bad, Lyric and I had to like, remind each other, because we had to keep each other afloat. And that's why I'm like so grateful that I had like a partner to like go through this, because if I was alone, I'm sure like it would have been different. Mm-hmm. But we kind of like kept each other afloat for sure. And I believed so much in him. He kind of like propelled a lot of it. It was his idea, and he like studied the industry, and he had taught me so much. He taught me how to DJ. He taught me a lot about music and how to make music and how to write and like how to be the artist that I am today. I credit a lot of it to him. And I just believed in him so much that the belief like poured over into myself, because it's really difficult moving throughout the industry. But when you start meeting people who are like-minded and things start growing, like we saw progress within ourselves. And this is what really kind of like changed it, was when we went to the New York session, which is Illmind's like hometown. Like he lives in Brooklyn. He grew up in Jersey, but lives in Brooklyn. And so when we went to the New York one, we had never really told Illmind that we were like struggling, because that's not something we want to really say or speak on. But we had a conversation we had a speech about who we are, to the group on that specific session. And we had mentioned that, we were struggling, and it was more of like to motivate the other people there. It was like, hey, like, we're homeless, and like we're still making it out to all of these sessions, and like we're still continuing to work. And I remember there's video footage that you can find of me saying like, hey, if like, and I was struggling a lot with my family at that time, and I was like, hey, if your parents don't accept you, your friends don't accept you, just don't worry about it, because with passion comes money. Like, and that's always the truth with things. You can't ever chase the money. You got to chase the passion. And passion, if you chase it, eventually the money will come. Mm-hmm. And so during that session, Illmind, I think he was just compelled by what we said, and he offered us to essentially never have to pay for another session again. And he's never, you know, offered anybody this ever, and he offered it in front of everybody. And that really like took us back, because it's like, this, you know, this is your form of revenue, one of your forms of revenue, and like you're offering two individuals free tickets to every single one of them, so we never had to pay for like another Pass the Aux section.
How
We had
much
to pay
were
for,
how much were the sessions?
they were $250.
Wow.
So yeah, it was $250, and you could bring a guest, and so like 250 would like, you know, bring us both.
And
And
how many people would show up to an event like that?
it was about 20 to 30 people usually. It's like pretty intimate, but it was a good amount of people every
And what
season.
did you do? You just played music in one
Yeah,
night, or
yeah.
for the whole weekend?
Yeah. So like it would be a studio session that would last about 8 hours or so, sometimes longer. And you know, the people would come in, and people would literally, it's called Pass the Aux. It's now called Blap Sessions. The name has changed, but at the time it was called Pass the Aux, because you would plug in whatever, your phone, your laptop, and you would show, you know, your beats, or if you're a rapper, you would show your song. And then Illmind would give like critiques on it and tell you, you know, what you could do better and what you could do, you know, all of that. And then there would be like a Q&A session, and you know, we would just ask questions about the industry, and he would answer like honestly. And this is things you would never ever get, you know what I mean, like watching a video or anything. This is like real, it's in real time. You get information that you need, and you also get to connect with everybody in that city. And that was the biggest part, was
Wow.
we got to connect with everybody in that city. So yeah, that was a trip that kind of like made us continue to do it all, because it was like, okay, he's not offering this to anybody else. There must be a reason why, you know what I mean? And take we can't drop this opportunity. We have to take it by the horns, and we have to continue on with it, because clearly what we're doing is working somehow. And you know, of course, throughout the journey, like we continue to make more connections, and good things were happening, although we were struggling before it's like the trip would be like this big high, and we'd go back home, and it would be like back to like the real world, back to struggling, and like back to like, you know, trying to get to the next event. And that's what we would always keep in our mind. It's just like, that's what kept us going. It's just like, oh, let's go to the next one, because it gave us an opportunity to travel and to meet people. Like I've met people in Toronto, I've met people in Miami, LA, New York, Chicago, Texas. Like this is opportunities most people never ever get.
Yeah. And you know, Tamae,
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated hearing this story. And
Mhm.
I for people, for young kids out there who are wondering how to make it, I mean, this is it. This is what they have to hear. This is what they have to listen to, is somebody who's actually gone through the whole, I mean, you make the whole parental thing sound so trivial, because the journey, the struggle is actually much bigger than the shit that you went through with your mom and dad, right? It just feels like that.
Yeah.
It's like your mom and dad was like just a small fraction of that equation. But the real big part is, God, it's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful journey to hear the, you know, traveling from city to city, building up connections. And I had no idea that that kind of shit even existed out in the real world, right? Like the events that somebody would throw up like that to put out there. And now I'm like starting to understand what Pass the Aux is. I didn't even understand what that aux is, the auxiliary cord.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't even put one and one together earlier. But so Pass the Aux is like the auxiliary cord that will go from your phone into their board or their computer, and they would play it on publicly so the whole group can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now I'm starting to piece together. And what a wonderful event that's set up for an artist, and to have that kind of commitment to go to every single one of them shows this passion, this undying, like this ability for you to just go all in and attack it. It's amazing to hear it. And so now my question is, when did your mom and dad turn around, or when did your life turn around? Or is it still a struggle? You know, like at some point, where is the tipping point?
Uh, they now, clearly they're more supportive of it. I think after a while, my parents kind of like, this is something that my dad did. He kind of just like, we had a conversation, and it was kind of during the riots and everything. Like I was still struggling with like trying to, build a relationship with my father and trying to keep things kind of like secret, because I wouldn't tell them too much because I don't want to worry them. You know what I mean? But all they knew was that I was struggling hard, and it was like a hard conversation for all of us to have. But me and my dad didn't really talk too much throughout, the past 4 years. And now I'm trying to really rebuild that relationship. But it it wasn't until, yeah, we had a conversation, well, in May, like a year into it of us traveling, exactly a year into it, Lyric had gone to London for one of the London sessions, and we couldn't afford to bring me with it. And so, like, that was like the biggest step for us, was like going international to one of the sessions. And I think Illmind was just like so blown away that, like we took that step, and he was like, yo, where's Tamae? And he's like, yeah, we couldn't afford to bring Tamae. And, so, but it's okay. Like, I'm coming here, like, and I'm just here to, you know, work, and I'm here to just like meet more people. And I think we always kept this like very genuine energy. And I think that's what like attracted Illmind to us, because it wasn't about like trying to, like, our goal wasn't to get signed by Illmind or anything. We're fortunate that it happened, but our goal was mainly
To learn.
to learn. That was it. It was just to learn and to connect with people.
Yeah.
And during that session, Illmind had offered Lyric a position as an assistant to him. And that was around the time when things started like shifting a little bit. And my mom started like, okay, let me see where this goes now. And like my dad at that time, we weren't talking too much, but he was at a point where he was like, okay, I'm just gonna let her like do her.
Wait, did you guys tell your parents that Lyric was an assistant? Like, did you
Yes.
explain to them, like, this is an important thing?
Yeah, I explained to them. I think they were still definitely skeptical at that time, but they were definitely like, oh, okay, things are, something's happening, but they don't understand what it was at that time. And we didn't either, but like we took the opportunity and we rolled with it, and we continued. And through the next 2 years, we continued to, add value to Illmind's brand. And we were just trying to learn and help as much as we can. And through that, we were starting to be able to like get put in like situations where it was starting to progress us as like artists and individuals. And it wasn't until this pandemic that things really, really changed, which is kind of crazy that in a pandemic things completely,
Got
flipped.
better.
Yeah. So during the pandemic, Lyric and I were mainly DJing as our form of revenue. And that's how we were able to like keep afloat, even though we weren't able to get like an apartment or anything. We were still able to like, survive and afford all of these like big trips. And so when the pandemic started, we couldn't DJ anymore. It cut off our form of revenue. And that's, of course, the rest of the world, we were all kind of just like freaking out, and we were at a standstill. And what I like to say is, when one door closes, another window opens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when the pandemic hit, we were kind of like at a standstill for a few months. Illmind had this decision where he wanted to hop on Twitch and, have a stream on there. Because at that time, I believe Kenny Beats had a stream on Twitch. And Illmind was like, yeah, like let's do a Twitch channel. And like he had Lyric and I, moderate the channel and kind of run all like the back end of the channel, right? And that's when things started really shifting for us. And so we were doing his Twitch channel for a while, and on there he would just like make beats and stuff, and it have like beat competitions and even collaborate with some of the viewers, because a lot of the viewers were like producers, and this is something different that people would have never had an opportunity to do. But he was like, hey, if you have any sample loops that you want to send me, let's collaborate.
So this is
And
like past the aux, but like online now.
online, and yeah, you get to see Illmind's process, and we had like deep, it's like a whole nother side of Illmind that you never got to experience before. And so people really loved it, and it hit off. And so like through that, we were able to gain revenue from, doing the Twitch channel and everything. And at that point, we were able to get like a temporary spot on our own. And at that time, people were sending in all these samples, and Lyric and I had a thought. Like Lyric was like, what if we make our own samples? Like, why don't we do our own? And I was like I never thought about that before. You know what I mean? At that time, I was just mainly focusing on being an artist. And I was like, oh, that's not a bad idea. And so like we started making samples, Lyric and I made vocal samples. And so
Wow.
yeah, so like I would like, we would make these feelings and compositions where I would have like a vocal sample on that, and we would send it off to Illmind. And he really loved it. Everyone really loved it. But what really changed was when there was a producer that had met me through Twitch, because he knew I like DJ'd. I was DJing on Twitch with Lyric. We had like a certain night called Club Lodi Nights on Thursday nights, and we would DJ on the Twitch channel. And this producer named Lavelle randomly was in the comments, and he was like, hey, like, I saw your Instagram page, are you down to work? And I was open to it. So we started working. Turns out Lavelle is this incredible musician, incredible producer, and he is connected within the Boy Wonder camp, which is Drake's camp, essentially. Boy Wonder is one of Drake's main producers. And so like he started, we started making all these like crazy samples with Lyric, me, Lavelle, and one of our artists from Australia. Her name is Alex. But we kind of created this little like circle of just like sample making. And the difference about our samples and like everybody else's samples that are out in the world is there's always been like vocal samples that you would see on like, websites like Splice and everything. And then there's always been just like melody samples. And Lyric, insane idea. This is when he like, suggested it. He was like, what if we put the two together and make like a solid product? You know what I mean? Like instead of having just a vocal sample or just a melody sample, why don't we put it together and give people that? You know what I mean? And like we started sending all of these off to Illmind. Illmind was like going crazy, flipping all of them on Twitch. And like we kind of almost started this like little movement of like having like producers and like singers or songwriters, collaborating and like making a full sample and product. And we started sending it out to Lavelle, started sending it out to, like Boy Wonders Camp, and all the producers that we had made connections with throughout these 3 years. That's when it started all coming together. Like everything just started like falling into place. And so like we started making all these samples, sending it off to these producers, like directly to them, instead of like selling it on like Splice or anything like that. We sent it directly to these producers, and they would make beats out of it and send it directly to the artists, because they had access to these artists. And Illmind had access to all of these artists. And so there was like a demand of this. And it got to a point where it was just like, I was making samples every single day. Lyric was making samples every single day. And we were collaborating with like Lavelle and all these other producers. And to a point that like Illmind he saw the opportunity. And I think at this time, things fell into place for him too. And he wanted to sign us because a lot of things were happening. I had like some possible placements with Drake and like possible placements with like other big artists. And it was something brand new. And it was like something that this isn't normal for a lot of people to like hop into the industry through this way. But we found a window and we created a path for that. And everything fell into place. And he signed us months later, you know, and he signed us to Empire and Roseville Music Group. And that's when things just like
How long
completely
ago was this?
we got officially signed back in, I'm sorry, I'm like backtracking. Back in like February or March is when we like
Well, that's
officially got
fairly
signed.
simple. I mean,
Yeah.
fairly recent.
Yeah. Super duper recent. And I don't, it was just moving so fast and it was crazy. It was all happening during a pandemic, but
Mhm.
it, like I said, you know, all the puzzle pieces just like came together at that time. And now my parents are, they feel a lot better about certain things because now I have like a solid backing, you know, like they, once they saw that, okay, she's actually signed and like she has so I have a pub deal with Empire and Roseville Music Group, and things were moving for us, and that's when they really started to kind of like change their point of view on what I was doing. And once I got, you know, my apartment, we were able to advance ourselves further with the advancement from, you know, the deal. That's when things changed for them.
Yeah, you know, I have like 20 questions that I prep for, you know, our session, and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I don't even think I got to four.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
Yeah, there's just so much
Am I
that I
talking too
wrote.
much?
Yeah. No, this is awesome because I love it when I go in to sit down with somebody and things that are much more interesting about their lives come up than what I could have come up with on the questions,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
who cares about my questions? Like, this is where the universe is taking you and I right now. Like that ability to kind of like move and pivot into things that are much more interested than these questions that I wrote.
yeah,
But I do want to ask a few questions,
yeah, please.
both regarding the technical side of the music and the business side, the money side. Um,
Yeah, okay.
but I guess I want to talk about the music side first, which is like, okay, I'm just gonna put it out there. A lot of the music that I hear, we all hear
Yeah,
on the radio today or in the music scape today, it's not like music. And I hate to be that old man who's like, you know, I'm a 45-year-old man, 46-year-old man who's complaining about the music wasn't, you know, it's not the same. But it's not. I mean, you listen to like Dr. Dre, you listen to Eminem, you listen to Tupac, and you listen to Biggie, you listen to all of these old, got old, it's like 15, 20 years, you know, but you listen to the old school rap and then you listen to the old school folk music. Like you go back to, you know, Bob Dylan, and you go back to Joni Mitchell, you go back to all of these old school songs, and you realize like there's these signature feelings that you could get from the artist. And I feel
yeah,
like we're missing that today just because of so much, I don't know, maybe synthesizers or so much, you know, electro.
yeah,
But how do you feel about that? You know, and I, you know, I haven't heard any of your music yet, so I just know
yeah.
that you probably have some opinion about that.
Yeah, I definitely do. Uh, yeah, have you heard T-Pain's little rant that he had recently about the music industry?
No, but can you tell me about it?
Yeah, yeah. He has a Twitch stream as well, and he had this like outburst because he was like, I think everybody's feeling this right now, but like music is at a standstill. It's like not inspiring anymore. It is just repetitive, really. And I think and I had this conversation with some friends last night, which is kind of crazy that we're bringing this up today. But I feel music is at a point where like people, instead of like being original, because back then like Tupac had a sound and like no one could copy Tupac's sound. Biggie had a sound, no one could copy that. Like everyone was trying to be different and have like their sound, and it was very regional. Like this is like
East Coast, West
East
Coast,
Coast,
Dirty
West
South.
Coast, this is South. Yeah, yeah. Like you heard all the regions of music. Nowadays, I think, because of social media and because of our access to technology and the internet, people were able to, reach into different forms of like music, regardless of where you came from. And so it, we're moving in a direction where like music is being more of like a trend than it is art, if you know what I mean. It's
Yeah.
more about like the money and what will sell. So if it's like, oh, this type of sound is really trending right now and this is what is selling, let me find more people like that. Like labels are thinking that, and like it's
It's
the
corrupted.
marketing. Yeah, it's corrupted. You know what I mean? It's mainly focused on the money aspect of things. And it's like, oh, if this works, continue to do it. And I think we feel the same way. I feel the same way, in terms of like movies and everywhere within art and our entertainment industry. It's just very repetitive right now.
But how do you move away from that? Because you
Yeah.
are in the machine, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Think
I'm in
about it.
the
You're in the machine. You're like, oh, well, I know that that's going to sell, so I'm going to make that. So how do you get
yeah.
out of that? How do you break free of that?
So I do have a very like specific position and a very important position, really, because as the person who creates that like sample, uh, I am a part of the music, or as a songwriter, I get to help kind of form or mold what the music could sound like. You know what I mean? And I think there's more and more people like me and Illmind and Lyric who are trying to find what that next sound or what that next like pivotal moment is. And everyone's searching for it right now, I think.
Good.
But yeah,
That's
everyone is
good.
searching for it right now. And one thing about me, Lyric, and Illmind is and our entire team is we're a very versatile team. And so we dive into a lot of different sounds and we try to be as experimental as we can while still, respecting what is trending at the moment. But right now, we are experimenting a lot. We are trying to, mold together different sounds, um, mold together different textures, and like just I think that's a big part of it is just trying to be experimental and working with newer artists to, see what else is out there, because the the creativity is in the youth. It's in the kids who are like
Yeah, coming up.
17.
Yeah.
That's where, because they don't have anything to corrupt them. It's just straight
Raw energy,
raw.
raw
It's
music.
raw
Yeah.
energy, and I think that's what we really strive for. So we just came back from a session in LA, and I was working with Sean Kingston and a few new artists, really great new artists, but like one of them, his name is like Ivy and La Voice and Maja, and these artists are raw.
Younger, a lot younger.
Younger, definitely younger. Sean Kingston is
Sean Kingston is a veteran now, right?
a better. Oh man, it was so crazy working with him.
And I remember when Sean Kingston first came on the scene, he was like this young boy,
Yeah,
And
yeah,
what is he in his 30s now, or how old is he?
yeah. I have no. I'm not. I don't know how old he is. He's, for the most part, still looks pretty the same. Like in the face, he looks pretty young, and
Yeah,
it's
as a young
crazy.
kid.
um yeah, even he has a part in it, and I think this is like what's important for the veterans within the industry right now is um so when he came, he had brought some like other artists that he was developing, but either way, it's the biggest part about being a veteran is being able to bring in the new talent, is being able to bring in that new sound, because they are the ones who are going to be responsible for it, who are the gatekeepers essentially, and they're going to be the reason. And I think music is moving in a different direction right now, where like labels are starting to have less control, and people know that, like people know what goes on within the labels and like how controlling labels, I don't know if I can say this on here.
Yeah, you
How,
can definitely say it. And I
yeah,
actually want to get into why you signed with Empire and the
Yeah.
business decision. But we'll talk about after we talk about the music, because
Yeah.
I still want to stay on the evolution of music. And
Yeah. So I think like things are changing. People are understanding, that you can be independent and you can still make, a great living off of music, and you can still connect with people. And like the power of a record label isn't really as powerful as it used to be. And the power is starting to land in the artists and the producers' hands nowadays. And I have a feeling that music is going to start shifting more towards the direction of what the producer wants, because producers are a huge part of music. You know what I mean? And they
I mean,
create.
Kanye came up as a producer.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
look at what he changed. Like
yeah. But
it's
God, that first album, I think it was College Dropout, right?
mm-hmm.
To me, I would never say that I'm a huge hip hop or rap fan, but I just know the general directions of things in that world. But when I first heard College Dropout, I listened to that album on repeat for, I don't know, a good month, because it was so new. It was so different from anything that I'd heard from before. And he was sampling like gospel music and just speeding things up and slowing things down and bringing in all these elements. And I was like, oh my God, I was so happy. And I was so happy because even the rap that he was doing at the time seemed to be so fresh, alongside the samples that he was using. And I was like, oh my God, this is I was so thankful for the next evolution of hip hop at that point, of rap point. And then everything just sort of descended after auto-tune. I hate to say this, but after the introduction of auto-tunes, a lot of it, it just kind of went to just a very monotonous, for me, just everything sounds the same, and I don't know if we're ever going to recover. Are we going to recover from the detriments of computers making music, and we need computers, and we need to record a certain way, and we need the help of computer aided technology. But at the same time, it's instead of making something new, it's actually making everything sound the same, which is making everything sound very old and not fresh.
Yeah. I don't think we're ever gonna really move away from auto-tune. I think it's like here to
Here to
stay.
stay, really.
Yeah, I for sure think it's just like here to stay, because like with our technology today, anybody can make music. Anybody can pick up a laptop. All you need is a laptop, a mic, an interface, and your creativity. That's all. And like I think because of that, I don't think auto-tune is really ever going to go anywhere. I think if anything, we're going to just advance more technologically with our music more than anything. And I think that's just going to progress. I don't think auto-tune really ruined it though. I can see where you like say it definitely ruined it.
And it's very ignorant of me to say that,
Yeah.
because I admit that's like a very old man way of looking at things. So I'm gonna say that right now. I apologize for all of the people who do use, and probably everybody in the industry now uses auto-tune, but there's definitely for me a line of a demarcation between like when auto-tunes came on the scene versus anything before that. You had raw sounds like Janis Joplin or Jimi Hendrix, and you have this raw energy of humans connecting with their audience using their own internal sort of energy, right? And then versus computer. I don't know, it's just such a struggle for me. I'm living in both worlds, and when I hear Adele or I hear Pink, I hear Lady Gaga, I hear a robust energy or vocal machine pumping out their energy into the world. But then I listen to modern rap, and it's just like,
no, I completely understand that.
And Kendrick Lamar is like one of the few who are that is just, it's just like pure talent. No matter you put auto tunes, you do anything to that person, he's going to gonna bring it in his own way. So it's almost like less about the music with Kendrick Lamar. It's just like the message and the pure raw messages that he puts out there, you know. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's my little rant.
No, no, I completely on that part. Yes, I agree with you. I- it's we just lost feeling within our music.
Yes.
We lost
To me,
feeling.
that is such a great way to put it. We lost feeling.
Hmm. I think we've been focusing for a while on just making vibes. That's it. Every song that you hear is a vibe. There's no message behind it. It's always talking about money, girls, and sex, whatever it is. But there's like no true. I remember growing up and like listening to Beyonce and like feeling absolutely empowered
Howard.
because like she was speaking about like real things in the world. And I think that's what we're missing is like we're not talking about the real things in the world. And I think right now people are starting to be ready for that because I think people are getting tired of just like feeling numb and like feeling just vibing. There's it's cool and all, but like there's so much happening in the world right now that sooner or later people are going to want some substance. And I think that's where the have you noticed that like rock is starting to like pour back into the music industry?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, rock has been pouring. Like, there's gonna be a rebellious phase. So, like, if you notice, this is something random, but like, this is something that me and my friends talk about quite often. But every century, I actually watched a whole video on this, but it's called the fourth turning theory. So like every 80 years, there is a change in era. Um, 80 years ago, the beginning of our era started in the 50s. Right before that, World War II happened, correct? Which is like something catastrophic that the entire world experienced. And then we went into the 50s and 60s. That was the boom of the era, right? And like there's like a switch every 20 years within it's like a 4-part
Mhm.
section to it. So like every 20 years, something switches within that era. And currently we are in, and this is like they've studied, history, and it's like, how they say like history repeats itself.
Yeah.
So it's
There's
a trend.
cycles to this.
Yeah, it's a trend. So currently we are in the very end of this era. We're in the fourth turning. And usually at the end of this era, this is where like new artists like emerge and like we're the next this should I believe the end of the era should be ending like 2038, that estimate wise. So like after that there should be like a new turning essentially of like a whole new era that we're going to experience. But for that to happen, something catastrophic or something big is going to
Like
happen that
war
like
or something.
completely
Yeah.
oh yeah, a war or something, because like it was World War II that happened that changed this era, right? And then before that I believe it was like the Civil War 80 years before that, and then 80 years before that was like the revolution, you know what I mean? So that's just like American history. That's what happened within our like cycles. And then like every single time there's like this whole boom of like music. Like the 20s was kind of like the beginning of that. It was
Got it.
after yeah, you know what I mean? So it was like here we are having all this boom of like the Renaissance era. So I think that's what's going to happen next personally in our era is like we're going to have something catastrophic happen. And um new artists are going to emerge because we're looking for something. Like the whole world is looking for something and waiting for something. And I don't know if you feel it, but I feel it. And I feel like something's in the water, something's about to happen. You don't know what it is, but we all kind of feel it. You know what I mean? A lot of things are happening in the world and we're just looking for that spark that'll change everything else.
I definitely feel that. We talk about it too in my group of friends. We feel there's a sort of like urge to be reborn into something new.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is yet, but it I can't deal with the music today anymore. It's like so difficult for me.
Oh, yeah. No, I completely understand that.
But with that being said, there are like cool music that, I'm
You
starting
have
to
to
get back
dig
into
for
it.
it. You have to dig
You have
for
to
it
dig
for
for it.
sure.
Yeah.
And
You have to dig for it.
it's going to come out, when the right time comes, there's new artists emerging every day. And I think a big part of my team and I with Illmind is we're just searching for that new artist. We're very open to it, which is why I love working with the team that I am with, and with the label that I am with, because Empire is a fairly open label when it comes to like music and when it comes to their methods as well. And it's not like the old school methods that you
Yeah.
hear, from Sony and Atlantic and all of this.
Can we talk about this? Can we talk about the structure? I don't want to
Yeah.
get into the dollars and cents, but I want to hear about the structure. Like, how does it work? How are you wh- how are you signed to a label nowadays when you could do music yourself? And why do you have to be shackled up to a label today?
Uh, so it all depends on, um, can you clarify that question a little bit
Sure,
more?
sure.
Like,
I'm trying to like ask a question and not be offensive,
yeah, yeah.
because I know that that being part of Illmind's operation is a wonderful thing. I can imagine, all the opportunity that comes with it. But at the same time, when I think about like just purely grinding as an artist and
Mhm.
putting material out there, and then you just slowly build an audience, or you can go out and produce your own stuff, sell it to other producers. I think of like the independent side of business versus
Mhm.
like being under a corporate structure. And today it just feels like when I do my podcast, I don't want to sign away licensing rights or anything. I'm just very closed minded about that stuff. I'm doing this for myself. I'm doing it for my own reasons, these podcasts, because I enjoy it. I don't want to be under a corporate, control.
Yeah.
So, as an artist like yourself, what is the benefits of signing with a label today?
It depends on the deal. It all depends on the deal that you take. So, you hear of like the 360 deals where, artists sign away their entire rights and all of that. And those are the ones you never want to be caught in.
And
And it
why would
often
people sign that away?
it's because of what they offer. Most of the time, this is what happens. Like, you find a brand new artist and like, they're young and they're like eager and they're ready to work. And you give them a large dollar amount and you flash it in front of their face. You say, yo, I'm going to give you $1 million, to do all of this. But, of course, like, we're going to take some of this and that and that. And most of the time, like, for a while, this is what happened in the industry. Not a lot of people understood like the business side of it or understood the legal side of things. And so, like, when you're a kid coming out of most of the time in like hip hop and R&B, they're most of the kids are coming out of the hood. And
Yeah.
like, when you're coming out of the hood, you don't really know any better, and you see like $1 million being offered to you, you sign that. You know what I mean? And with that being said, you don't read all the underlying
Fine print.
stuff. And for a while, nobody was really talking about it. It was very taboo. But now that information is coming out, people are being very vocal about it. And so that's what's changing is knowledge. People are being more informed these days. And I think now, because of that, labels like Empire, who are, doing things differently, um, this is why I love them, because they're doing things differently. The certain deal that I'm with, I get to keep all of my rights to my music, which is new, and it's different. And I'm very fortunate is that I'm with Illmind, because he set that up for us, and we were able to build a great relationship with him, and I trust him, and I know he has his, our best interest in hand. And so my team and I probably have one of the best deals anyone can be offered as like an upcoming artist. So we still have to do quite a lot of the groundwork with the specific deal that we have. Most of the time when you sign like a really big deal with a lot of money, um, the label has more control because they're giving you more money. And the difference between that and us is like the deal. I don't know if I'm able to talk about the specifics, but you know, we got offered a smaller amount of money. But with that smaller amount of money, it was like our seed money to be able to grow. And with that smaller amount of money, there's less liability and less like risk, because when you signed a large amount of money, not a lot of people like put into consideration that you have to pay all that money back and then more. You have to like pay the label more because it has to be profitable for the label, right? So you have to pay that 1 million back plus double that to make it profitable for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you can't, it's like there's a lot of like loopholes and all this other stuff. When you can't, that's when things get really messy and people get stuck in these deals and where they are kind of like slaving away and trapped, and they're trying to get out of this deal, but they can't unless you're somebody like Drake or like somebody amazing like Beyonce or like you know with a great backing, and you can make hits after hits after hits. Then maybe you could sign a deal like that and like be able to get out of it. But for the most part, most people get just get trapped in it. You know what I mean? And so like the deal that I have, luckily, I get to keep all of my rights. I just get access to a lot of people because of the label that I'm signed under, and it's very fair and it's super super safe. You know what I mean?
So you're just basically splitting whatever the income, the revenue is with the label because they're on hand to support whatever infrastructure you need. So
right. So like since it's a smaller amount of money, I get to repay a smaller amount of money, and then everything after that I get to keep.
Got it. Makes sense.
And then we still split after that. So yeah, that's essentially how it works.
Wonderful. We actually got through a very tough topic because and then we got through it. So I'm glad to hear that. And it for the moment it works because I'm glad to hear that you're safe, right? Like to hear that somebody like an artist is safe from the studio system. So I wanted to ask you, have you been to Vietnam before?
Yeah. I went back 5 years, 5 or 6 years ago is when I went back for the first time since I was like a child. And
do you keep up with the Vietnamese music rap scene, hip hop scene in Vietnam?
Yes, I have. That's actually, I've gained an interest in it like recently, and it's definitely opened a lot of like new opportunities for me that I want, you know what I mean? Like I have like brand new dreams, and like it's really, really cool. The first artist that I like found was Su Boy. She's a rapper within Vietnam, and like I'm the top like female rapper in Vietnam right now.
She rapped at my wedding.
No way. Yo, you're so cool. That's so cool. She was like, the reason I got into the music industry is because like I never had like anyone to really look up to when it comes to that. And when I saw like Su Boy and like what she did and like what she was talking about too, because she was talking about like fairly controversial stuff at that time. And this is what I love about like hip hop, because like I think this is why hip hop is one of the most influential genres, and it's like the biggest genre in the world right now. And it's because hip hop is rooted from like people being able to speak their truth and to like tell what's happening within like the world, and like for people to connect that way. And that's what she did, because I know like things are kind of rough in like Vietnam right now, and government wise, you know what I mean? And she is talking about like real problems, real things, and people are connecting to it. And when I saw it, man, I was like, this is the coolest thing in the world. I remember like I showed Illmind. I was like, yo, look at this artist. And I was in the car and I was like, this is the coolest artist. I was like, and she's like a big, idol of mine and inspiration of mine. I love her. And one of my
God.
dreams is just like to work with her and like to work with some of the artists in Vietnam, because like after what I have learned through my journey and learned about the Black experience and like the history of like hip hop and R&B. I know that a lot of music in Vietnam right now is like has a lot of influences from like hip hop and R&B and neo soul and all of this beautiful music. And one of the things that I want to do is to be able to go over there and like work with the artists over there and songwrite with them and collaborate with them and kind of help like push the sound in the right direction. Because I think one thing that's really controversial right now is like, and this has always been like a gap. There's always been a gap between like Black musicians and then Asian musicians. You know what I mean? There's, I think it's because oftentimes in the Asian community, like we are very much affected by hip hop and R&B, and we love and appreciate it, but we don't really know the history of things like this, like reoccurring conversation that we keep bringing up. And because of that, like, the Black community isn't so happy when like they see us, making crazy amount of money off of like their sound and like crazy amount of money off of, like even just look at K-pop, for example. Like their entire model is built off of Black 2000s R&B and hip hop. Every single bit of it is taken from Black influences, but it's never talked about. We never give the respect that is needed for these artists, and we never like truly connect with them. And one of the things I want to do is to be able to go to Vietnam and like with the knowledge that I have now and like the position that I have to kind of help start educating, some of the people over there and like bridge that gap between like Black people and Asian people. And I think if I can do that through music, it could bleed through to, us socially and us as people.
That's the dream. Yeah, that's the dream. That's the dream. Suboy was in California a few times.
Really?
Yeah. I don't like to because it is really about boasting and bragging, but
yeah,
there was a time that we were very close because of I can't really get into it, but socially we were very close at one point, and I'm still very close to Sue. But I could actually brag about taking her to Crenshaw Boulevard, and driving her, because I grew up in that neighborhood. I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood.
Like?
It was cool because she got to witness, like the Crenshaw Boulevard and, Jefferson and Martin Luther King and sort of that South Central area of LA. And, yeah, she's definitely a pioneer in the world of rap in Vietnam, and so much contribution to the scene in Vietnam. And she's growing as an artist, as a mother, as somebody who is definitely doing big things for Vietnam, and I'm very proud of her work, and so many different artists in Vietnam that are doing amazing things, like Wowie is another rapper.
Yes.
Vietnamese rapper that raps about really real life things that occur.
Big fan of him as well. Like, huge fan.
And I think, I'm sitting here thinking you'll eventually get to, work with all these people, because it's not, it's not, the divide is not as far as we think. It's an ocean or two, but I think the digital bridge will bring you to Vietnam at some point. You will get connected to all of them, and who knows if whoever's listening to this will reach out. And I think through Johnny, that from VidQ Media, he is in touch with a lot of Vietnamese American and Vietnamese German, all these Vietnamese music people throughout the world. So eventually there's this bridge that will happen. And it'll all I mean, you're definitely on your way to
Yeah.
to a lot of good things. And we didn't even get to talk about some of the things that I wanted to talk about today, which is more technical stuff, technical music stuff, how you build beats and how you put together things. But I would like to talk a little bit about your process, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
for sure.
Yeah.
100%.
So, like when you have an idea in your head for a concept of a something that you're writing, like, can you walk me through from A to Z how you do it?
Mm-hmm. Are you speaking on samples or are you speaking on songwriting?
But okay, let's talk about samples first, because I think
Yeah.
songwriting is. But are they? How different are they? Why don't we start with samples first,
Yeah.
and then it's up to you. Do you want to start with
Yeah.
samples first or songwriting first? Whatever.
You can start with samples first.
Okay.
So it's for samples, it's what I try to do is try to recreate kind of like the feelings, because a lot of people sample from like 70s music, 90s, 2000s, and even further back, right? And the thing about samples, and this is why like the sample game is such like a huge thing, is because um, you have to like get those cleared if you sample from a specific record. And so when it comes to samples, we create like certain feelings. It might feel like a 70s record, but it's like completely new. You know what I mean? And so like I sometimes pull inspiration from like certain songs or certain artists and certain eras. But when it comes to that, most of the time I come up with a melody, or sometimes the words come first for me, but um most of the time it's like a melody that comes to me, and I build off of that melody and then add words that I feel, if it needs words, but add words that I feel would really resonate with whatever the song is or whatever I'm trying to portray. Because the thing about samples is it's a part of the beat, and you never want to like overpower like the artist, right? So when it comes to making vocal samples, I try to like keep it as balanced as possible to the production, and then have in mind that an artist is going to hop on top of that. And so I try to give it space,
Yeah.
and as well as like try to portray what the feeling or the message that I'm trying to push across through that sample, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And then,
Yes.
how long are the samples?
The samples are usually about 16 bars.
Okay.
Yeah, 8 to 16 bars.
Why are they or 16 bars?
Because we try to keep it short so that it's not too much for the producer, whoever we send it to kind of like pick out their parts. Like we create a composition that gives a distinct feeling, and that's like my goal, is to spark something for the producer or for the artist to create more over that. But I don't want to overwhelm the artist or producer with like giving them a full song to like sample from. Instead, I had to study like a lot of music and a lot of hip hop and R&B and how they use samples within those and where they come from, to understand how to format and how to leave space for the artist, and how to like create this like just like the perfect 8 bar or 16 bar composition for them to take something from and then like build something off of that.
So you take 16 bars, you send it to a producer, they use that as inspiration, or do they ever use it in the song?
Most of the time they use it in the song.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is stopping a producer from taking, I know this is some Vietnamese hustle mentality here, but
Yeah.
what's stopping them from taking the 16 bars that you did and then just like tweaking it and then like running off and doing whatever they want with it and not buying it from you?
Well, I'm not really selling these. So like most of these samples that we are sending out, we're sending directly to the producer. And these are like relationships that we have built. So like for the most part, I don't feel that most of them will do that, but if they do, there's, you know, precautions that we can take, like, and that's where like the legal parts come in. Like if, you know, they say they used it and they tried to recreate it with like a whole nother singer and a whole nother producer and created it in a slightly different way, most of the time people can tell. And when that comes, say they release that song and that song, you know, blows up and you hear that sample and you're like, that sounds quite a lot like the sample that I had. Oftentimes you can like backtrack it, you know what I mean? And that's where lawyers and the label come in, and all of
Interesting.
that legal stuff comes in.
Wow.
Yeah. So I can't stop them. You know, if they want to do that,
But
then they can
that
do that.
that probably doesn't happen often, right?
No, it doesn't, luckily, you know. And uh, I will be selling samples soon, you know, to the public, for like other people to use as well. And when it comes to those, it's like there's, uh, it comes to the legal part, but there's like fine print. And essentially, if the song blows up and it hits like a certain amount of number, you use my sample, then, you know, we get the proper credit and all this other stuff. And that's why I'm very fortunate to have like a great label behind me, and then a great lawyer, and, you know, a great team that will ensure that like things go correctly.
So with a sample, you're not selling it to producers now, but how do you monetize?
I don't sell it to producer. I just monetize it off of once I get that placement. Like if that song ends up on
Oh,
the album, that's when, you know, for those specific samples. So we make exclusive samples that are specifically for our network of producers and like the producers within the industry that we like, you know, send it to directly. And then when it comes to selling samples, I would make like a separate set of samples that I would give to the public. And that's like a different situation. And so, you know, anybody can use that at that point. But this is a
specific
different
for
method. Yeah,
producers.
it's like a specific, because like sometimes, and this has happened before, like a producer hit me up and he was like, hey, you know, Kanye, Drake is looking for this specific sound. They're looking for this specific sample that kind of feels like this. Can you make something like that? And I make something exclusively for that person, or I make a few things exclusively for, and they can choose from that. And
But
whether they use it or not,
you get paid for that though, right? That the work of no.
no, 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 no. So it's,
So you
yeah,
only get paid if it gets placed.
yes, yes, essentially.
Oh, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's sort of like you're writing everything on speculation almost, right? It's you're
Yeah, yeah,
everything's on spec. Like
yeah,
scripts, like movie scripts are sort of the, people write a bunch of movie specs and they're send it in as samples, and if somebody uses it, then you get paid once it goes into production.
yeah. That's kind of like the tricky part about the music industry. And because like you don't have a guarantee, you know, everything is still left up to like, I mean, we have a guarantee because we are signed to a label and we have more access to a lot more people. And so, like, sooner or later, something's gonna, you know, hit, right? But, and we get into rooms with like Sean Kingston and being able to like write a song with him. So that is more of an opportunity than like, say, John from like down the street who is still trying to,
Make it.
you know, make it. But yeah, essentially, it's still just kind of like a gamble. It's a
Yeah.
luck base, you know what I mean? And the more you make, the more likely something will land. And I think that's kind of like an actor. The more auditions you go to, the more likely something's gonna land, and that's where you
Yeah.
start making money.
And that's the thing. I think when I was growing up, I remember my parents were like, and then just hear it around the Vietnamese community when we were growing up. It's like, you see that guy in the corner playing guitar? We don't want you to become like that. We're sending you to learn, guitar or piano, but we don't want you to end up making a living like that guy playing guitar at the Third Street Promenade or whatever, out there,
Mm-hmm.
But I think in the American landscape for music, there's sort of all of these different levels of
Mm-hmm.
making art, making music,
Mm-hmm.
session players. I mean, it sounds like that's basically, like a session player in Hollywood to come on and play guitar or drums, or, it's a different level of money making.
Yes, most definitely. It's yeah. I mean, it's a different playing field. There is a difference between like the music industry and like the music business,
Hmm.
right? So if you just sell some sample kits, like you're in the music business, you sell some CDs, you're in the music business. When you start getting into the industry side of things, that's where things are a little bit different. You know what I mean? And I think that's a question a lot of people should ask themselves is like, do I want to be a part of the music business or do I want to be a part of the music industry? Because it's the same thing or relation when it comes to, say, a vendor for chicken. You know, I work at a deli and or a butcher shop and I sell like chicken cuts. I'm in the chicken business. But when you make it up to like Tyson level or, you know, something along those lines, I'm in the music industry and that's where things kind of like change. And like there's a lot more different um
Interesting distinction.
yeah, it's like a lot more different rules you gotta go by and um different guidelines you have to like move within, you know?
Yeah. Well, Tamae, thank you so much for your time today. I mean, I've learned a lot about your business, your music business, and
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to be able to experience these things. You know, these stories that the development of an artist like yourself, and
Yeah.
I appreciate that very much.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. Like really this has been a really fun experience to be able to share this and to be
Yeah,
able to talk about these topics.
and hopefully next year, or whenever you have some new project or things that you want to talk about, we'll come back on and we'll do it again.
I would absolutely love that. Yeah.
Cool. Well, take care. Have a great week, and
Thank
I'll talk to you soon, hopefully.
All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to The Vietnamese with Kenneth Nguyen. The Vietnamese is produced by Brittany Tran and Javier Proenza. Special thanks to Jane Nguyen, Catherine Nguyen, Tina Pham, Sydney Jamie, and Christo Trin. Please find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at The Vietnamese Podcast. You can also find us on YouTube, where you can subscribe, like, and comment. Please rate and give us a review wherever you find our podcasts. Thanks again for listening.